Hi, this is Shaun. This is the second video in the day-night series that I'm making. And so what we're going to do now is that we've got the day-night cycle set up, is we're going to, well, we start out at midnight, and then we transition to early morning. We'll turn these lights off when it gets to like 5 a.m. and then maybe turn them back on around 7 p.m. So that's the first thing we'll do. So let's go into the level blueprint. And so the first thing that we need to do is get a hold of the data. So how do we know what time it is? Well, we created a variable in the last video that will allow us to know where we are in this 24-hour cycle. So I'm going to drag a noodle out here and promote this to a variable. And I'll give it a name. So we'll call this time of day. And so we need to make sure that this time of day is set. So not only is it happening, but we need to always make sure that we've plugged this in. So now that it's set up, the time of day, we are going to, I also want to sort of know what the time of day is, and be able to print it out to the screen. So I've got a variable set up for it. I could drag out a variable. Oops, I want to get the variable. And I'm going to right click and say print. This print command is so useful. You can print out to your screen. But right now we've got this time of day, but we need to convert this in order to, this is a string variable and we've still got a float here. But the engine will automatically convert that if you drag backwards, which is kind of nice. And so now we've got the time of day, we've got it set, and we're also going to print it to the screen. So we'll know what time of day it is. And so now let's turn lights on and off based on the time of day. So let's get the lights that we've got in the scene here. We've got point light 1 and point light 2. So let's bring those in as, bring their variables in. So right click, add reference to point lights. And then what we're going to be doing is, if the conditions are right, we will be toggling those lights. Okay, and so how will we know when the time is right to turn the lights on or turn them off? Well, we already said that our plan is that maybe around 4 or 5 a.m., because it gets light early in our scene, to turn those lights off because they're on initially. So let's do that. Let's find out. So we've already got the time of day variable right here. We could say that, well, how would we do that? We sort of want to evaluate, or we want to compare floats. So we'll say, okay, this is going to kick out our time of day value, but we want to say, well, compare with what? Well, we said we'll turn those lights off early. Say 4 a.m. it gets light enough for those lights to be turned off. We'll keep hooking these things up. And what else? Well, we also have to say, we have to evaluate, is the light on or off currently? Maybe somebody already turned the light on or off in your level, if you have that ability. So we'd want to error check here. So in terms of error checking, there's a branch that you can declare, which then can evaluate based on this, which is the red noodle is a Boolean variable, which is just a true false. And so in order to know, let's create a Boolean. So we can drag off there and say promote to variable. Whoops. Or we could click over here and just generate a variable that way. So I'll do it this way, and we'll call this light state. So the light state variable is a Boolean saying is it on or is it off. So we'll drag that out and we will get that value. We'll plug it in and we'll say, okay, we will say we're getting a little error here, and that's just because we need to compile every once in a while. So hit F7. Looks like, okay, that's solved it. So if it's after 4 a.m. and the light state is true, then we want to turn it off. We want to toggle these lights off. So we need to make sure that our Boolean is set correctly. So the default value here won't show up until you compile. So just make sure that if it's not showing up, hit F7, then you'll be able to access the default value. So I'm going to say, okay, that's checked on, so the default state is true. And so if it's after 8 in the or 4 in the morning, and it's turned on, then we can go in and toggle our lights. So, but if this was the case, then what would happen? Well, we would have a light flickering. And so what we need to do is we need to set this variable to false. Once it's been toggled off, we need to sort of modify that value. So let's go here and we'll set that variable after we've toggled those lights and just connect it. And so now after 4 a.m., it's this will no longer be, the fact that this is on is no longer true, and therefore it shouldn't go here. So let's just double check to make sure that's working. So F7 or click here to compile. Let's run the simulation, or Alt-P. So 3, 4, the lights turn off. Great. Okay, so that's working. So now what do we need to do to turn this thing back on? So let's, well, we probably want to create another comparison in order to make that work. So I'm just going to copy and paste this node. Oh, looks like I'm still simulating. So copy and paste, make another comparison. If you want to sort of run two things at the same time, you used to be able to drag out noodles and just do two things at the same time. Now you have to do it's a sequence. So in fact we're going to probably do a sequence of 3 if we can get those turbines running eventually. So we'll have to add another with this pin. So there we go. And here we are with the compare second float. So then we'll say, okay, well, what's next? So the lights will turn off initially after 4 a.m. Then we'll probably want to turn the lights back on after, say, 7 p.m., something like that, like 1900 hours. And so we need, we'll probably want also another branch to make sure that that's working correctly. And we also need this. Looks like we're missing an input, so we'll also hook the time of day into there. And then we'll say, okay, if it's after, so if it's greater than 1900 hours, then we'll do a check here into this branch. And what are we going to say? Well, is the light off? So it should have, this set should have switched it to off after this first cycle. So when we get up to 1900 hours, then we will toggle the visibility yet one more time and set this variable one more time. So I'm just controlling and pasting, Control C, Control V. This time we'll turn this to on. And we'll once again drag these in here, and we will say So let's see what's going to happen. It's going to turn these off. So we've got to check our logic to make sure this is correct. And so by the time this gets to, it's going to set this to false. And so it's going to say, okay, if it's after 1900 hours and this is set to false, then we need to toggle it to turn it on. And then there we go, we've turned it on. So let's just double check that the logic's set correctly. And so here we are. We know this first part works fine. The lights turn off. And so when this gets to 17, we should be good to go, hopefully. There goes the sun setting. And the lights turn on. Excellent. Okay, so that does it for turning lights on and turning lights off based on time of day. In the next video, I'll get these windmills running. Thanks so much for watching.